Hello everyone, I am Professor P. Sridharacharya from Srinivas University, Bangalore. Here I am going to give an introduction to object-oriented programming. Let us see what is an object-oriented programming. An object-oriented programming is the principle of design and development of programs using a modular approach. Here we are getting a new term called modular approach. What is modular approach? Why is it so important in software industry? Let us discuss. See, as shown in the figure, modular approach is very well used in the software industry. The objective of the modular programming is splitting up of the complicated thousands of lines of code program into smaller pieces called modules. As shown in the figure, we have a main module which is split up into three sub-modules called Module 2, Module 3, Module 4. And Module 2 is further factorized into Module 5 and Module 6. So it can be factorized into any smaller modules. You will reach a situation wherein further modularization is not required. So this is a main concept which is used in the software industry in breaking the complicated problems into smaller, simpler, modular programming. So all those languages which support modular programming are currently used in the market. One among them is our object-oriented programming. So, object-oriented programming is a principle of design and development of such modular programs. And this programming approach provides advantages in the creation and development of software for real life applications. As I now mentioned, the structure of a modular programming from top-down approach or maybe from bottom to top approach, whatever approach it is. Basically, in the software industry, modular programming approach is a real life approach. So that's why object-oriented programming approach is very well used in real life applications. Now, let us look into the limitations of the procedure-oriented programming. What are the procedure-oriented programming? How are they different from object-oriented programming? What are the limitations of the procedure-oriented programming? Let us discuss. The conventional programming languages, including C or earlier language called Fortran or COBOL, all these are the examples for procedure-oriented programming language or POP. So, what do we mean by procedure-oriented language? Procedure-oriented programming language basically consists of writing a list of instructions, which means actions, for the computer to flow and organize these instructions into groups known as functions. So basically, procedure oriented programming languages are function oriented programming languages. Even object oriented programming languages are also function oriented programming languages, but there are changes when it comes to procedure oriented programming language. Basically, they are the languages which are grouped into set of functions. As you can see in the diagram, a main program is getting a help of several functions, and one function is invoking the other function. We have got function 1, function 2, function 3. Function 1 and function 2 may invoke function 4. So function 5 may be invoked by function 2 and function 3. See, here we can see only functions which take responsibility in execution, and this structure is very well entertained in the procedure oriented programming language. So, in a multi-function program, many important data items are placed as global so that they may be accessed by all functions. Each function may have its own local data. Now, as it is mentioned in the point number 3, important data items are placed as global. If you place important data items as global, then security issues come into picture. You have local data which are defined inside the function. What is the local data outside the function? Whether local data is defined outside the function or it is just limited to that function, all these are complicated to understand. Looking into the program structure only, we are able to identify whether a data is defined locally to a function or the data is a global data. Right? So, point number 4 is very clear, which says that global data are more vulnerable to an inadvertent change by the function. So, if the function brings any changes, that may affect the global data also. So, security is an issue. So, in a large program, it's very difficult to identify what data is used by which function, because it is a procedure oriented programming language which gets the help of several functions, and a programmer may get confusion in identifying the data, the changes to those data inside the function, or visibility of the data inside the function and outside the function. All these are complicated. And fifth limitation of a procedure oriented programming language says that it does not model real world problems very well. This is because functions are action oriented and do not correspond to elements of the problem. The functions are action oriented and they really do not correspond to the elements of the real world problem. As mentioned in the point 5, depending upon the current situation, we cannot implement our problems in a program using a procedure oriented language, because all the procedural approach is not suitable for solving real world problems. To give an example to this point 5, I will use a famous procedural oriented programming language called C. I can use the built-in data type, any of the built-in data types, let us say integer, real, float, double, character, string, which are all basic data type. Extension of that is what is called user defined data type in the form of structure, wherein I can define multiple basic data type and I can try to convert a procedure oriented language into solve the real world problem. Let me take an example of a student. What are the entities which are important to identify a student? Every student is identified by his name. Every student is identified by his register number. Every student is identified by his contact number. Every student is identified by his email ID, date of birth, address, course to which he has joined, what not. You can think of minimum 20 or 30 different activities related to a student. My problem here is, can I take the help of procedure oriented programming language to solve these kind of problems wherein I take students' information? I cannot depend upon a procedure oriented language wherein all the information about a student can be solved. So this is major limitation of the procedure oriented language. So mainly what we have understood in this discussion is multiple functions confuse a developer in tracking. One thing. Second thing, the data. Either it is a local data or is a global data. What is the value of the data inside a function, outside a function? It is difficult to identify. Then global data are more vulnerable. No security is there. No security for the data. And finally, we cannot consider multiple information about a particular entity or object. So that's why I am coming to the concept of object. I cannot consider student as an object using procedure oriented language, wherein I declare all the parameters of the student which is required to me in my programming language. So moving on to the object oriented programming. Whatever problems we have seen in the procedure oriented language can be solved using object oriented programming language. So let us look into the three words: object oriented programming. What is an object? An object is a collection of a set of data known as member data and the functions that operate on these data known as member functions or methods. The sentence is very, very important, which explains the nature of the object. What is an object? It is a collection of a set of data. What do you call that data? we call that data as member data, and functions that operate on those data, which we call a member function or member functions, which are called methods. So 2 points to understand. As shown in the diagram, there are three objects which are shown in the diagram: object A, object B, and object C. So what are the content? What are the internal contents of these objects? They contain member data and member functions or methods, which are which are used to access the member data. Member data are the data defined by the programmer, and functions which will operate on those data, either to read the data or to get the data for the computation or to display the resultant data, so whatever it may be. So methods are used to access those member data. So very important point to understand. So another property, another very important point to know with respect to object-oriented programming or object is the member data are encapsulated in an object and then can be accessed or modified only by the member functions. As it is mentioned, the member data are encapsulated inside the object. Means member data are not accessible outside. Nobody can get the details of the member data other than the member functions. No outside function, no outside program. As it is mentioned, it's a modular programming language. Any other program without the help of the member function cannot get an access to the to the member data. Member data are purely encapsulated inside an object, and one and only member function or member functions can read the data, access the data, modify the data. They are free to do so. No outsider is allowed to do. Now, how are you going to define this member data? How are you going to define an object? For which we require something called a class. We require something called a class. A class, what is a class? A class is a template from which objects are created, or the templates of the class specify the data, the member functions and their attributes. What is a class? It is a template for an object. For example, just now I mentioned student. So for myself, in order to develop a program, I require the following information of a student. Say, register number of a student, name of a student, class of a student, contact details of a student, date of birth of a student, email address of a student, father's name, mother's name, address, state. So these are all the various requirements for me to the student. So what I do is I define a class, or what I call all these are the ones which I mention inside a class. So a class contains the structure of an object. what are required, what are not required. So member functions also are declared in a class. So the total concept of object is well explained in a class. So a class is a template containing the list of member data and the functions which are associated with that particular member data. So two very important points we have discussed right now. One is called object, second one is called a class. Object, what is an object we have seen? What is a class? We have already seen. Now let's look into the class as I already told. Class is a template, or I can give a beautiful word for a class as it's a blueprint representing a group of objects that share a common properties and relationship. It's a beautiful word. Class is a template or it is a blueprint representing a group of objects that share a common properties and relationship. What do we mean by that? It is a blueprint. As I mentioned, student. What is a blueprint? I want the register number of a student. I want the name of a student. I want the date of birth of a student. I want the contact details of a student. I want email address of the student. These are all the blueprint which are defined inside the class. So there is an example which is given, a blueprint which contains the member data. What are the data? Name, date of birth and mark. And functions which are associated with the member data. What are the functions? Total. Total is a function which is going to act upon a data called marks. Average is one more function which is going to act upon total marks. Display, maybe one more function to display the results. So all those functions are member functions which are going to touch or which are going to modify the data. Example, very simple example is given here about an object, and we declare an object called student. This is a class where I have got two, one the member data and another one the functions. Okay, so class is nothing but a blueprint or a template representing a group of objects that share a common properties and relationship. So the last part of the sentence I have to give an example. It represents a group of objects. That means the moment I declare a class, say student, I will declare student as a data type. Just like we declare int, char, float, int, a comma b comma c in C. What do you mean by int a comma b comma c? A, b and c are the data types of integer. So group of variables which share common property. What is a common property there? It is integer. A is an integer, b is an integer, c is also an integer. Similarly, here also, the moment we declare a class, the moment we get a blueprint of it, any number of objects we may create. I may create 2, 3, 4, 5. Whatever objects I create of a particular class, they share the common properties. They share the common relationship. The structure of those objects are the same, the common. Now, classes are user-defined data types. Another very important point. Why do we need classes? Because we need to define an object. Why do we need object? We found the limitations in the procedure-oriented language wherein the data types are not as per the user defined. So that's why we are going to an object-oriented programming environment wherein classes will help the user to define his own data type. The classes will help the user to define the user-defined data type. And classes are user-defined data types and behave like the built-in types of the programming language. They are the built-in types of the programming language. Also, a class is a way of grouping objects having similar characteristics. Once a class is defined, any number of objects belonging to that class can be created. So what does it mean? A class is a way of grouping objects. As I mentioned, int A, B, C. What do you mean by A, B, C? A, B, C are grouped together of what? Type integer. Similarly, here also objects can be grouped together having similar characteristics. Once a class is defined, I can create any number of objects of that particular class. The moment I create, let us say I have created 5 objects of that class. What does it mean? All the 5 objects are having similar characteristics. Who is going to define the characteristics? Who is going to give the template for that object? It is the class which is going to give the template for the particular object. So now let me explain the same concept by taking an example. So let us discuss a sample object-oriented programming using C++. So what is a sample? So the problem statement is given. Write a C++ program to create a class with data members like principal amount, time and rate of interest. Create a member function to accept the data values, to compute the simple interest and to display the result. Before going to the problem, before going to the program, let us clarify the problem statement. What is it written? Write a C++ program, fine, to create a class. That means we have a responsibility. Our first objective is to create a class. Okay. What is the structure of a class? The class contains data members as well as member functions. Okay. What are the data members we require here? It is mentioned. A class with data members like principal amount, time and rate of interest. So there are 3 data members. Principal amount, then time and rate of interest. Now, of course, they are private data. We require some member function to access those data values. What are the private members? We need to define one private member which we need to define is to give the values to those data. Second member function, it's a function. Second function is to compute the simple interest. Third function to display the result. So altogether there are 3 data members, 3 member functions. So just look at the class definition. I am coming to the program. I am defining a class as SI, simple interest. As mentioned in the problem, there are 3 data members which are called amount, principal amount or amount which is an integer, rate as float, time as integer. See, it is up to the programmer. In the place of amount, he may write principal, or he may write principal amount, or he may write P amount. It is up to the programmer. So int amount here stands for principal amount. Then rate of interest. Normally rate of interest should be taken float. Sometimes it is 2.5%, 8.6%, 5.1%. Like this interest rate is calculated. And we require time for a period of year. How many years you are going to calculate the rate of interest. Then the result contains interest. Rate of interest is different, interest is different. So principal amount, rate, time and result. These are the 4 data members. Now I am declaring a function. See, my objective, my logic is I would like to explain the function somewhere outside the class. I would like to explain the function somewhere outside the class. So how do I do that? I can do that only if I declare the functions as public inside the class. So I am explaining, or I am defining 3 functions. 3 functions include get data, compute SI and display. Get data is a function to read the values to those private data elements. Compute SI is a function to calculate the simple interest. Display is a function to display the result. So this is the way how I define or how I explain the function. Okay, let me take you to the function called get data. See, I can write this function void SI scope resolution operator get data. This is possible if I declare get data as a function which is defined inside the class under public. If it is private or protected, I cannot write this type of statement. These type of statements, void SI scope resolution operator get data, is possible only when I declare the function as a public. Okay, what do I do here? I will read the value for amount. How? I give a statement, please enter the value for principal amount. So I have read the value for amount. So now amount will have a value. Then enter the rate of interest. So rate also will have its value. Then enter the time period in years. So I write time. So time, years. So through this particular function, what is the function? Get data function. I am reading the value for amount, rate, time. These 3 I have done. Now I am calculating another function. What is that function? The function is compute SI. What is this? Calculate the simple interest. All of us know simple interest is calculated using a formula called principal amount into rate of interest into time divided by 100. So I am storing a new value to the result. Result is equal to amount into rate into time divided by 100. So please remember, amount gets a value through get data, rate gets a value through get data, time gets a value to get data, whereas result will get the value by executing a function called compute SI. So now I need to display the result. So I need to display the result. Okay, simple interest is equal to result. So this data I can display at the output, standard output. See out, simple interest, that is the result. So altogether I have written three functions. Get data is one function, compute SI is another function, display is one more function. Now moving on to the main function. Here one very simple point I would like to mention, that in most of the object-oriented programming languages, you need to concentrate on class definition, associated function definitions. But when it comes to main program, your main program is very small and very simple. Okay, let us start discussing the main function. So, the main function, I am declaring an object called SI of the class SI. This SI is different, this SI is different. This is the name of the class, this is the name of the object. That means SI is an object of the class SI. Okay? Now the question comes, can I define another object? Yes, I can define another object. I can say SI, comma, PI. PA can be one more object of type SI. Then I can define A. A also can be one more object of the type SI. So I don't have a limitation. So maybe in previous discussions, what we had is, we can define any number of objects of which share a common properties or similar characteristics. Here, same thing. Suppose if I declare SI, comma, A and SI are objects of class SI and same properties are being shared. Same properties have been shared. But here in this case, since I am declaring only one object, that is SI, so now SI dot get data. What will happen? It goes to this function wherein I am reading a value for amount, I am reading a value for rate, I am reading a value for time. Once I get the value for amount, rate and time, I am computing SI dot compute SI, so that this function will execute. I will get the result. Then once I do so, I will display SI dot display. So I will be able to display the interest, that is a result. Okay, so this is a very simple main function. Here, another very important point I would like to explain, that whenever you are writing a program, always program starts executing from this point, from main. So CLR, SCR will be the first executable instruction. Then it goes to SI dot get data. Then it asks, what is SI? Then it looks here. Oh, SI is an object of class SI. What is that class? Okay, it comes to here to get the details of the class. Fine. Then what is that get data? Goes here to get the value of data. So like this, always your execution will be from the main program. So the output looks something like this. Enter the principal amount, whatever you enter the rate of interest, you entered, enter the time period, you entered, the simple interest becomes 2000 calculation. So here My objective is very simple, to explain what is an object, what is the importance of a class, what are the contents of the class, how do you explain the functions which are called member functions outside the class, because you have declared it as a public. So put together a sample example to prove an object oriented programming using C++ is explained. So this is the very first and simple example which explains how an object oriented programming is running. So today in this video, I'll go back once again. We have discussed what is an object oriented programming, what are the limitations of the procedure oriented programming, then what are object oriented programming in the sense, what is the meaning of a member data and member functions or methods, then what is a class, how is it associated with object, we have discussed. Then we have taken an example to prove our discussion, and this is the result. So I'll conclude this session here. Bye. I'll come out with a new video to explain the further activities related to object oriented programming. This is just a simple concept to explain the object oriented programming we have seen. Object oriented programming has a lot of other services. So let us see the other services of an object oriented programming by means of examples. So all my videos will contain the theory part of it and an example to prove that particular theory. So with that, goodbye, have a nice day.